Hi guys, my name is Andrea Domian and I'm a Southern California-based portrait photographer specializing in magazine quality portrait for everyday people. And today I have a friend of mine in the studio with me, Tony, who is a brand expert, and we are going to talk about personal branding photography. Tony, welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming here and doing this talk with me. First of all, before we start talking about personal branding photography, let me ask you to introduce yourself shortly so that we know what you do, who you are.
I'm Tony Cavaliere. I run an agency, a digital marketing agency in Orange County, California, where we are. And we specialize in creative strength that elevates brands. That's essentially our tagline. That's what we do.
Wonderful. So I wanted to talk to you about personal branding photography because I feel like there are a lot of things that needs to be clarified about this, or there are some misunderstandings. But before we go into that, have you noticed that big brands or big companies are really good at having amazing, outstanding quality imagery on their websites, but smaller businesses or entrepreneurs, at least this is my experience, this is what I think, they tend to overlook this or a little underestimate the importance of having these really good quality images on their website?
Sure. I think that smaller organizations kind of don't know what they don't know. And when you're looking at a corporation, that's an organization with a lot of experts at what they do in each of their roles. And so I think that's where they have the advantage. They understand the importance of what you're talking about, of image. And it's not that smaller organizations don't understand that. It's whether they have bandwidth, whether they have budget, right? Like so those are the things, and there's nobody reminding them. So if it's a small owner of an organization, they don't have somebody saying to them, hey, you ought to make sure your marketing is spot on, your imagery is on, and everything is consistent with what your brand message is.
Yeah, I agree with that, but what do you think when someone says that, oh, I understand that I need good photos on my website, I'm just going to have my husband take some, like we go in the backyard or something. I think that's what I meant with this question, that they do not think that it would be important to actually invest in good quality imagery for their websites.
I think it's because they don't understand the value of it. They don't work in the space like you and I do. Right, this is a visual space, and they don't work in that space. They work in, let's say, they make a widget, and they know how to make a widget, right? But they don't know that in order for other people to care about that widget, they need to make sure it's photographed in a way, or they need to be photographed in a way that makes it more compelling. Mm-hmm. They're not aware of that. They're busy running their business.
That's true.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And they don't. I think it's not understanding the value of it is the biggest issue.
Yeah.
So it's almost an educational thing.
I totally agree. So then let's talk about what is personal branding photography and why is it important. For instance, when it comes to portraits, we're not talking about product imagery, just product imagery. When it comes to portraits, what is different when we talk about headshots and personal branding photography? What's the difference?
Gosh, it gets complicated. So I am in the communication and language business, right? You might think of me as a brand expert. Really, I'm just a brand student. And what I pay attention to is the language that people call something. And language changes over time. So there might be a new term for something that never existed before. So with personal branding, the understanding of actually what it is. So the difference between me showing up on my first date with my wife, sort of dressed up, appropriate, looking like I respect her enough that I want to put the best version of me forward, that means something. That means something, first of all, to me. It also potentially means something to her. That means that I value her enough that I would make sure to present the best version of myself. So when we talk about even personal branding and what personal branding actually means, I think there's an issue there. Even as you describe the word, personal branding, you'd first have to understand what a brand is, If you don't understand what a brand is, then there's these two things that are disconnected. So it's a person and it's a brand. Well, a person isn't a brand, right? These things don't go together. But the fact of the matter is they do. So individuals, and so I'm sorry to go so deep into this, but
No.
I'm a geek about this. So an individual, a person is actually a brand. So there's the things that we understand about somebody, like you, for example. There might be the way that you look. I understand the way that you look generally. I understand the way that you speak, and I understand the way that you think. And what I do is, as a human, is I start to piece those things together. There's a bunch of little jigsaw puzzle pieces that I piece together to make Andy the brand. But I would call you, in our normal language, I'd call you a person. I'd call you a human or something, but I would never call you a brand. And that's the sort of the issue with the language that we have. We don't, as soon as you might describe somebody as a brand, people, I don't want to say they get offended, but they kind of get confused and they say, well, a person's not a brand. And I would argue that. I would say, absolutely disagree with you. A person is a brand.
Yeah, I would say maybe Kim Kardashian is a brand.
Every,
Like she's obviously a person, right? But she is a brand.
She's also a brand. And so once people start to understand that, and so when you talk about headshots, right? A headshot might be what we describe as a photograph or something that we've done. How many times have we been photographed in our life? Maybe in family pictures, out with friends, or a selfie, but how many times have we officially sat down for a photograph? When I think of the word headshot, there's two things that I think of. I don't know what most people do, but two things I think of is a headshot is the photograph you have in your yearbook, which you hate, right? Because it was the 14-year-old version of yourself and you had braces and your hair was wrong and you didn't think you were cool, right? So there's all those issues with that. And then a headshot from an industry perspective is like an actor, for example. Well, do you have your headshot? Oh yeah, I have my official, here it is, and this is who I am, and you know, it's the best version of me, and that's how I get a role, for example. So that's a headshot, in my opinion. I don't know what most people think of when they think of a headshot, but personal branding and being able to communicate in an image, through photography, communicate who somebody is or the essence of who they are. That's personal branding, in my opinion.
Exactly. That's how I used to explain this to my clients too. In my world, the difference between a headshot and a personal branding photo is that the headshot is basically that shoulder and head crop image that you were just mentioning. And yes, a lot of actors have that, but also you see that a lot on corporations' websites when it's like the about the team section and you see the little headshots. Those are headshots. But a headshot doesn't necessarily tell me a story or even reflect the personality of the brand or that actual person. When I do personal branding photography for someone, what I'm trying to do is to place them into an environment that reflects what they do. And even without them saying anything, or even without me reading the copy next to that image, I can tell what they are. For instance, a dentist, right?
Yes.
If I want to photograph a dentist for personal branding, I'm going to photograph the dentist in the dental office. I'm going to have the dentist pose with different props, hopefully not in a cheesy way, but that's the idea.
Yeah.
I had this interesting story, by the way. I had a business coach reach out to me, and she said that she wanted branding images of herself, and she also said that she thought that maybe going to a park would be a nice location for those. And so this is where I come in, and I told her I felt like there was a little disconnect there between the business coach life and, for instance, how I imagine where a business coach is working out of on a daily basis, or what she does, and a park, right? So I actually told her that when I do personal branding photography, for instance, for a business coach, I picture her in an office, I picture her with a laptop, I picture her in a business or business casual outfit, not necessarily in the park. So my perspective on this is that I want to place these people into an environment that kind of speaks for them, that tells me the story, what they do, or at least I can place them somewhere. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think it's very important. I mean, I even think, going back to language and terminology, when we talk about photographers, Well, photography is essentially just an action. I can pick up a camera, take a picture of somebody. That makes me a photographer, technically.
Yeah.
So to describe yourself, right? So most people might say, oh, well, she's my photographer, or she took photos of me, or whatever. I don't know that they understand what you're really doing, the backstory behind what you're doing and what it is you're trying to capture. So anybody can take a picture,
Yeah.
right? And that's
Yeah.
the issue is what you see,
Yeah.
right? Maybe whether it's a pet peeve, the fact that you have the capacity to take a picture. But what you are, I mean, the way that I would describe you, if I was branding you, is I would call you an image director.
Ooh.
So what's happening is you're putting together these two words. So image, which is what you're about, right? But the director part, which is the guy or girl or woman, oh man, I just choked that, is, right, the perception is it's that person that's behind the camera. And they're making all the decision. They're asking the actors to do certain things or set up the scene a certain way. Well, why are they doing that? They're doing that because they know better what's happening on the other end of that camera. And they know that if you turn your head this way, well, this side is, which side's better? I have a good side, I have a bad side, right? And so if you put together the words image and director, what it does is it explains to people what you're actually doing. And there's a process. It's also almost mathematical for you, where you put together this process and you're trying to create a story. And if you can place all of those components together, or all of those ingredients together in an image, that image will speak 1,000 words, or whatever the phrase is. That's what you're doing. And that's the difference between what you do and what everybody else does.
That sounds amazing. So, okay, here's another question for you. Why not stock images? Let's say I'm building a new website. Let's say I'm a dentist. Why should I get photography done with me on these pictures, me and my team in my office, over grabbing some beautiful, really cool stock images from a stock website and just, put it all over my website?
Well, I might not answer this the way that you would expect. So there's nothing wrong with stock imagery. There's a lot of things about stock imagery that's great, which is, let's say that you have a limited budget. Stock images, right? I can buy a month, and it'll cost me $250, and I can download 1,000 images, and right. The problem with stock images, in my opinion, from just a stock imagery statement, is the images aren't of the individuals or of the organization, so they're not even taken in that environment. The other problem is, I believe, because stock imagery is so readily available, that it's now overused. People can kind of taste it and smell it.
Exactly.
They know when this image isn't real. Well, I'm looking at these pictures. It doesn't look like these are the pictures from the organization. I'm not sure why there's just a smiling woman or she's laughing in some setting. And so the misconception is, oh, well, it's a pretty picture of a person. It's engaging. Well, great. It's a pretty picture of a person, but it's not relevant to your business.
Exactly.
And so that is a mistake that I think is happening. But typically, a lot of us make decisions based on budget.
Yes.
So we've already made the decision that, oh, well, I'm not going to spend several $1,000s on photography, okay, or imagery. I've already decided I'm not going to do that. So what I do is then I make these other decisions that, in my opinion, are short-sighted. You've invested what, 50, 100, 250, $500,000 in your business, and you don't want to spend a few $1,000s on photography. That's a huge mistake.
I agree. And that's exactly what I meant about, that's exactly the angle that I was hoping to take with this question and this part of the discussion with stock imagery. I think stock imagery is good for filler images. That's what I call them for. If we stay with the dentist, for stuff, for images of their tools, right? If you want pictures on the website that kind of fill in some spaces and you want some pictures of the dentist tools, that's totally fine to grab from stock imagery websites, right? But to me, and I think you probably agree with me on this based on what you said, is that when I see a website that is full of stock images and there's not one real image of that person, it almost alienates me from that business a little bit, because I feel like it's not real. I need that real element on the website, at least for the about page. And for those people who work on a low budget, I always tell them, okay, let's do stock imagery. Grab some stock imagery, but at least get a good headshot of yourself and show up on your website. Because when I go to a facial person, an esthetician, I want to know who I'm going to see. I want to know what that person is about. And if I have a picture, if I have a face that I can associate with that name, I have more trust immediately towards that brand. Maybe it's just me. But to me, it is really important when I see real people on these websites and I can connect immediately to that brand.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's loaded because I have a lot of thoughts on that. So we just, as humans, we are visual creatures, right? We also have taste and we have touch. We have a lot of senses. What we're always doing is we're always making decisions. And a lot of people don't talk about this. And what's happening is we're looking at our entire environment, our surroundings, maybe somebody that we would meet that we might want to be friends with, or somebody that we're going to go into business with, or we're just going to purchase their products. We're making all of these decisions all the time. Like, we're talking thousands of decisions every second we're making. And I think what you're alluding to is the disconnect between fake images on a website and the real people that are running an organization. So typically what people think, and I believe that it's just because they're not educated. I don't mean they're not smart. Uneducated about, well, I don't take good pictures, so why would I put a picture of myself on the website? There's other prettier people. So it would be logical to say, well, I'm just going to find some pretty people, put them on the website, then the website's more pleasing to look at. Well, sure, but if I want a pleasing looking website, if I want to look at good looking people, I'm not going to go to your website to look at good looking people. I came to your website to look at you. And so people, the reason that I believe they should have sort of an education in this, and this is sort of what we're talking about, but the idea that as a brand, you're trying to communicate who it is you are. You're not trying to put another face on your organization. And that's where people are a little bit confused, right? So they'll see brands, I'll see a large brand, whether it's, Nike, and they're using a pretty person, or a big Chanel fashion brand, right? They're using this pretty person. They're not using a real person. And that somehow makes the product more engaging or palatable or enjoyable to interact with, right?
Yeah.
But people are savvy enough to know that we're all just regular people and we're running businesses. We're real humans. And the idea about communicating your brand is actually trying to communicate what it is and who it is you actually are. The closer you can communicate those things, the more trust that a customer will have with you. So they'll say, well, I saw the website, and while you might not be the prettiest person, right, the images that we got communicated who you were, so that when I got on the phone with you or I met with you in person, those two things matched up perfectly. And that's what we're looking for. That's where we start when I was talking about being visual people and touch and auditory, et cetera. Our brains are trying to match these things up. So the closer you are to what you're presenting digitally or online, wherever you're presenting your image, the closer those two things match up, the easier it is for someone to say, I trust this organization. And that's how we're making most of our decisions, on perceived trust.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Totally. Okay.
And did I answer your question, by the way? If I didn't answer it, if you want to talk more about the more about why it's important to have higher end images in a website or something like that, I could speak to that as well. I think I might have gone a little bit
Yeah.
off the track a little bit.
I think we can also talk about budget and what we talked about before, you and I, when we had a conversation over the phone, where you said, that's one thing if people can afford to invest in good photography, but can they really afford not to invest in it and have bad pictures taken of themselves or low quality imagery on their website, right?
Yes. Well, that's the mistake, right? So the people are having perceptions all the time. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that you're presenting the best version of yourself, not a false version of yourself, the best version of yourself. And so that's why the investment of photography, in my opinion, is so valuable. Not only that, but you can take it from a website. We might talk about one application, but now you're talking digital. Everybody is on mobile devices, and this past year has proven that we are now more on mobile devices than we ever have been. So your image is really important. The imagery that you take, you can then use across all of these different platforms. And all of those things are consistent. So we start talking about, I use language called touch points. It's the way that a brand interacts with people, all the different ways it interacts. But if you can get your imagery consistent across all of these channels through a photo shoot, like a proper photo shoot, not only that, but you can be thinking through the diversity of those images. If you're getting a headshot, well, what's a headshot to people? Is it in a particular pose, and is it, looking a certain way, or is it, well, what would you look like if you were in a meeting? If we were communicating just like this, face to face across a table, who would you be? Do you smile more, or were you trying to look corporate when you took the headshot? And so the idea that you can get into a photo shoot and you can actually take a variety of images that truly reflect the entirety of who you are, right? This person is a very smiling or engaging person, or this person's more serious, or there's times when they're both people. If I can see all of that imagery across all of these different touch points, I can connect it and create the entirety of what I think your brand is.
Yeah. So when you work with photographers, I know some of the photography you do in-house.
Yeah.
But we have worked on several projects together in the past. What are you looking for in a photographer when you're hiring someone to do branding images for your clients? So you take care of the brand, the image, you take care of the website, you take care of the communication part as a brand expert, but then you work with a photographer. What is it that you're looking for, and what do you think people should look for when they are reaching out to photographers for branding specifically?
Well, I would steer any individual towards not only a great photographer, right? But how do we measure a great photographer? I can look at images online and I don't know what it took to take. I don't know how much effort it took to create that photo or to retouch it or anything. So how do I really measure it? Am I qualified to measure the expertise of a photographer? I don't know.
But you have a feeling when you look at their work,
we
right?
We do have a feeling.
It makes you feel something when you see beautiful images and beautifully executed images. Maybe you are not able to tell it. Maybe you would as a brand expert because you have a lot of experience in this field yourself. But as an average person might not be able to tell why is that photo different or better, or why they like it better. But for some reason they connect, or they tend towards that. They gravitate towards that special photographer.
Yeah, and I think I'll back up a little bit to the statement of image director. So what you're not understanding, most people don't understand or don't realize, is what it took to get that photo. And you're not taking pictures of landscapes. So if you were taking pictures of landscapes, then you would go to a particular spot, you'd map it out, you'd spend 4 days there, and you'd figure out at exactly 4 o'clock, on Half Dome, the light hits it a certain way, and if it's cloudy, it's going to be orange, and whatever that is. And so, but you've done your homework in order to take that image as a landscape photographer, for example, or nature photographer. You're not. You're dealing with people, and people connect with other people based on nonverbal communication. And so what they don't realize is what's coming out of that photograph is actually all of your work. In most cases, someone will come to a photo shoot scared to death. Nobody wants their photos taken. Even people that get their photo taken don't want their photo taken. And so what they don't realize is the result of that image is all of the work that you did behind the scenes in advance. And this is where I believe, because people don't understand, they say, well, that's a great photo, but they don't understand that the only reason the photo was that great is the effort that you put into it. And I don't want to take away from the actual person, right? We get stuck in language like beauty. Well, this person's more attractive than this person. Well, clearly that's a better photograph. It doesn't make it a better photograph. It makes, well, this person's prettier than this person, or more handsome, or whatever. But it doesn't make it what makes it a better photograph is, are you capturing what you intended to capture, and are you communicating to the viewer what you're wanting the viewer to receive? And that's all of your homework on the back end. And can I speak a little bit to
Yes.
one of the projects that we worked on?
Yes, please do.
So our client, the idea is that our client is a swan. And so you were hired to do photography. Well, what you did is you invested your time. You invested in trying to come up with what would make it the most successful photo shoot, right? So what you brought to the shoot was you brought decoration, that was added now, that
Yes.
you even brought, clips and needles and sewing. And so we sewed on feathers onto a sleeve and made the image. The images were unbelievable. They were gorgeous, but more importantly than that what I got to see was the behind the scenes, where you had a personal investment in making sure that these images were exceptional. And so, well, what makes it exceptional, right? It's the level of detail that you go to pull out of not only what maybe the wardrobe is, how the person's posture is, but what you can bring to it and help create the best version of that individual. That's what I think you do.
Yes, and in this specific case, I had an easier job because you had already done half of my homework yourself and just broke it down to me, like, this is what I'm looking for. And you knew exactly what you wanted to communicate through this brand and through the images. But when I meet someone who is not working with a brand expert like yourself, or they just reach out to me and say, hey, we're just, we're just getting a website done and we need a couple images. The first thing I do is go through a bunch of questions with them about trying to get a deeper understanding of what their brand is about, who they are, what they stand for, what they want to say, what they want to communicate as a message through their images, and just in general, I want to get to know them really well before I even start putting the ideas together for their brand. And then next step would be building a mood board, which is basically, you're familiar with the mood board, but for those who aren't, it's basically a set of images that will give us a direction to go to during the photo shoot, a set of sample images from the internet that I envisioned for this specific brand. Of course, using our own locations and our own people and props, but it gives us kind of a direction where we're going, so we have an understanding, and the client is also educated about what we're gonna do, and they also have a saying in it, like, okay, they see something on the mood board they don't identify with or they don't like, then that's great. We're just gonna take that out and do something different for them. But yes, so personal branding photography is way more than just images, and there's a lot of homework that needs to be done before. I totally agree with that. Yeah. Okay.
And you did mention something. Can I interrupt
Yeah,
you?
absolutely.
You did mention, you talking about mood boards, and it reminded me of getting a haircut. So when you go in to get a haircut and you see somebody else with a particular haircut that you like, and so you go into the hairstylist and you say, this is what I want to look like. A good hairstylist doesn't say, okay, and cut your hair like that picture. A good hairstylist says to you, if this is the case, they say to you, listen, your face, I don't believe is going to look good in this particular style. So I can make some other recommendations for you. So somebody that's an expert at what they do is going to give you information that you may not have so that you can make a more informed or educated decision as you move into personal branding, photography, whatever that is, as you move into that, you can make more educated decisions because of the expertise of the person you're working with.
Yes, I think that is a little similar to the case with the client who is a business coach and wanted to take pictures in a park. I told her that it was a good idea, but I think it would be better to take these pictures in an office environment, in a really cool office space, maybe her with a laptop or something. So she had an idea, but I had to tell her the truth. I had to tell her that I don't think that fully reflects the personality of her business or what she does. And I wanted people to take her seriously as a businesswoman, as a business coach. So I think if she is shown in a more businessy environment, which doesn't have to be stiff imagery, she doesn't have to be, like stiff or too serious. She can dress business casual. She can be herself, but just by placing her into a cool office space instead of a park, it's gonna give you a very different message of her.
Sure.
So there's one more thing that I wanted to touch base on because this keeps coming up. People have photos from 10, 15 years ago of themselves, which they really like and prefer because obviously those photos were 10, 15 years ago, so they look younger, right? And it sometimes happens that they use those on the website or they want to use them. They're like, okay, we don't need to do a photo shoot because I have these pictures, I like them. And that's when I come in and try to educate them on that there is basically a shelf life to these pictures too. And I don't think it's a good idea to use photos that are really outdated, not only because of 15 years have passed, but do you think it's important to follow trends in photography when you have a website and you put photos there?
Sure. Well, you spoke to shelf life. And so, things change, right? Hairstyles change, your age changes, and the goal is to actually reflect who it is you are. And not a version that you'd like to be, right? I want to be younger, I want to be taller, I want to be slimmer, all of those things. But that one, when I showed up in person, you'd be pretty disappointed if the photos were what I wanted me to be versus who I am. And so the idea is that we're trying to make the most up-to-date, accurate representation of who this individual is. And what's also, I think, nice about it that we don't talk about enough of is sort of being confident in being you, right? And all the flaws, right? We can all, I'm sure you can, I can, everybody can list your top 10 flaws. I bet you can list them, no problem.
Yeah, 50.
Yes, maybe we have more or less, but the idea is that if you embrace that, sometimes people want to shy away from those things, but actually some of the flaws turn out to be uniquenesses that make you different than other people, make you identifiable as a brand. Maybe most people are, they're mortified that they have a mole right here on their, and they for their whole life, and it's the thing that most people love about that person or their image. They go, gosh, I wish I had a mole just like that.
It's so funny. I just heard, I think in a podcast that because now everyone is on Zoom and they see themselves all the time, people have been like calling the plastic surgeons' offices. Like the plastic surgeons are really busy now because people are, faced with their own picture, which is another topic because that's so distorted for so many reasons. But it's something that I'm learning too, even with this interview that we're doing, or me as a personal brand. I'm a personal brand, right? I am my brand.
Right.
And I have to be in front of people. I have to be on social media. And I'm having a hard time with that. First of all, I really had to make peace with, okay, this is who I am. This is how I look. These are my flaws. I'm going to be okay with that. Another thing was learning to accept my voice, hearing my own voice, right? On videos. Yeah. And to me, the biggest thing, my biggest block was my accent. And also that my English is not my first language. So sometimes I'm searching for words, or sometimes I get stuck and I don't know how to express myself. And it was a huge, huge hurdle to overcome for me. And I'm still, I don't like to watch my own videos too many times, but I've kind of came to the terms that, okay, this is who I am. This is what, in a way, makes me unique. and people will have to deal with it.
Right. Sometimes your biggest flaws are the things that people, like I said, they love the most about you. They might love your accent because we don't get to hear that accent. I don't get to hear that accent very often, right? So it's interesting. It's unique, and it makes you unusual in a good way, right? A lot of people say when they hear the word unusual, they think, oh, well, that's not normal, or, well, who wants to be normal?
I don't.
Right. And so there's another thing that you brought up that I think I just want to speak to. And that is there's what you do. There's what you do for a living, and that you take images. Most people are uncomfortable in that space. What you do exceptionally well is you make people comfortable doing something that they don't want to do. So, for example, the thing that comes to mind is skydiving. So many people don't want to skydive, never want to be in a plane, never want to be that high up. Certainly the last thing that they would do is jump out of a plane at altitude.
Yeah.
Right? And what I believe your gifting is, and this is where a lot of people make the mistake of saying, oh, well, she's a photographer. She's a personal branding photographer. It doesn't matter. It's describing you as a photographer. So what that's doing is it's eliminating what really makes you valuable. What makes you valuable is that first of all, you're passionate about what you do. And that comes through. And so when people talk about branding or how they present themselves, well, it starts with some fundamental things, at least in my opinion. What I do for a living, I love to do. I would do it for free, but don't tell my clients that. I would do what I do for free because I love it. I'm a brand geek, a brand student. I've been interacting with brands my whole life, and it's what I do, it's what I love, it's the way I think, right? I live it and I breathe it. And so what I'm not sure people might not be aware of what's happening behind the scenes when they work with you is that you actually really care about people and you love what you do. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to present the best version of that individual, right? And what they might not also realize is that you're affirming them, right? You are supporting them. So what really is happening is I would actually argue, if you're actually a photographer, I would say that you are a friend, you make people comfortable, and you come alongside them in this space that's incredibly scary for most people. And you make it not scary, which is the sweetest part about what you do, because that shows your commitment and your care of other people. That if I just describe you as a photographer, we don't get the opportunity to see any part of who you are and why you do what you do.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you. I sometimes feel like I'm a therapist too. There are some very interesting stories in the studio. Yeah, but it is about that. It's about empowerment, and it's about, I want to make an impact by giving people an experience and giving them a result that changes their life for better. Not like life-changing. It's not what I'm saying. A photo shoot is not life-changing, but in some cases it can be. But I just want to add to their lives. I want them to experience something that will always be a very positive memory for them. And I always tell people that photo shoots in general, especially with me, like that's what I'm trying to get out of these photo shoots for them, is that it's an experience, and the photos are just an added benefit, almost like a side product of the entire process. But I want them to like the process. I want them to have an experience that will last just as long as these photos. So, yeah.
And I think, I'm sorry, am I interrupting?
No.
And I think you are, and I think that's the thing that other people don't, because they're so afraid or hesitant to have images taken. Maybe for whatever reason they're uncomfortable or they're fearful. It is the experience, and I actually think it's kind of a priceless thing. You have an experience, and what you come away with is you come away with documented imagery that's been thought through and is beautiful. You have that for the rest of your life. It's very valuable. How many times do you really get that opportunity? We have the opportunity to take bad pictures all the time, right? Selfies are not pretty pictures. Okay? And so to me, the investment of it is I don't even think it's measurable.
Yeah, and they become priceless like over time, even more.
Absolutely.
And if you just think about that, one day your children or the children of your children will look for photos of
They
you.
will.
What will they find? Right?
Yes.
Will they find the Snapchat filters with the bunny
Yeah.
ears and the selfie photos, or will they find beautiful portraits or photos? Right? How will they remember you? So yeah, that's a very different. It's a different topic. That's a thing I could talk about for hours. Why we should have pictures taken for
Absolutely.
generations to come, and why exist in those photos. But just back to personal branding photography, and then I think we can wrap this up. Is there anything that you would like to add to this conversation? Something that you wanted to talk about and we haven't?
Gosh, I think the thing that I would say is I would want people to understand, not to make, this is really going to sound tough to say, but we make decisions all the time about money and what we think the value of something is. And we've already decided that, oh, well, that's not necessary, or that's not affordable, or whatever it is, right? We've already put a container around what this thing is. And I think it's a little short-sighted. And so to me, when we talk about investment, right, what do we talk about? The stock market, right? There's a risk associated with it. And what is your actual return? In my industry, everyone talks about ROI. And so I guess I would say that to educate people enough to know what the ROI is of getting professional photography done of themselves, their organization, etc. The ROI on that, I believe, is not measurable. We want to measure everything by, well, I spent $1 and I want to make $1.50. It's not the way that photography works, and the way that we as humans interact with imagery. The value of it is almost infinite. Once you take those images, once you invest in those, it's an infinite ROI, at least in my opinion.
I totally agree, and I actually know from experience that this type of investment comes back tenfold because of those amazing first impressions these photos make on people who are potential clients to these businesses, and then they end up closing those deals. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. So just to wrap this up, where can people find you if they want to contact you for branding questions?
Most often in my house.
Okay.
But if they want to talk about branding questions, brandsandbrawn.com. Brands, A-N-D, brawn, this kind of brawn, muscle for your creative muscle for your brand. And also on social channels, it's Brands and Brawn. So it's the letter N, Brands and Brawn.
Okay, I think I'm going to include this on the screen of the video so that
Thank you.
to make sure everyone gets it right.
It was really clever at the time, right? Instead of Brains and Brawn, it was Brands and Brawn, because that's what we do, and it's creative strength. And so it got, as you see it spelled out, it's a little more complicated, kind of a tongue twister.
Yeah, we'll make sure to include the links under this video. Thank you so much for being here.